The story begins in the 7th biosphere, where the city of Liang is suddenly attacked. A sharp warning siren echoes throughout the entire city, causing people to panic and scramble to find shelter. Moments later, countless blazing meteors pour down from the sky, like a rain of fire-carrying destruction. Yet amid the burning scenery, one strange object stands out: an azure blue crystal, completely untouched by flames. The blue crystal hurtles downward at incredible speed, as if it has a specific target within the chaos of the city. In the blink of an eye, it crashes directly into the body of a young man. The violent impact makes him spit out blood. Before he can even recover, the crystal slowly sinks into his heart, and a mysterious energy begins to pulse inside his body. The scene shifts to the present, where many students have gathered at the school's training ground. In front of them, a man delivers a speech, explaining that the students' only hope of becoming elite martial artists in the future is to enter the Hongji class. The instructor explains that the placement exam is modeled after the college entrance examination and consists of two parts: a written academic test and a martial arts assessment. The total score is 750 points, 225 points for academics and 525 points for the martial exam. He hopes everyone will apply what they have learned and answer carefully. He emphasizes forcefully, almost shouting, that only the top 10 students in the overall ranking will be able to enter the Hongxi class. After that, he announces that the academic exam is about to begin and orders everyone to enter the exam hall in an orderly manner. As Chen prepares himself, his mind is crystal clear: this is his chance to become a martial artist. He recalls his first year of high school, when he suddenly lost consciousness and fell into a coma. Out of concern for his health, his parents were forced to apply for 2 years of medical leave for him. Now, he knows that this is his final opportunity. He must seize it at all costs. While walking toward the exam hall, he is suddenly struck hard by another man. It turns out to be a group of bullies, and their leader, standing in the center, arrogantly asks whether Chen is really planning to take the exam. The man mockingly says that anyone can dream of entering the Hongji class, but Chen, who has been on leave for 2 years since his first year, still dares to participate in the examination. With a frightening smile and reddened eyes, the bully stretches out his hand as he speaks. He says that this kid truly has guts, getting sick, taking 2 years of leave, and now directly charging into the Hongji class exam. Does he really think he is some kind of genius? Before the bully can touch him, Chen immediately grabs the man's hand with his own palm, gripping it tightly with tremendous strength. Coldly, he says that he appreciates the concern, but the man should worry more about how he himself is going to pass his own exam. After that, Chen turns around and walks away without hesitation. One of the bullies comments that Chen was obviously bullied back in his first year, yet now he has become so arrogant. What if they teach him a lesson after the exam? Their leader stops them. In his mind, he has already noticed that the boy's grip strength is far from ordinary. He scolds his companions, asking if they have no brains at all. If they are caught now, they will definitely be disqualified. It would be better to wait for the martial exam later. With a sinister smile, he thinks that if he, accidentally, cripples Chen during the exam, no one would be able to complain. Chen is now seated at his desk. He looks at the question on the screen, which requires a short answer. Describe the current state of the world and the first day of the High Martial Calendar. This is common knowledge, so he immediately begins answering. He recalls that in the year 2842 of the Old Era, a civilization from another world was discovered and launched an invasion of Earth. Humanity retaliated with nuclear weapons, but after 2 years, they were completely defeated in the war. More than 5 billion lives were lost under global nuclear radiation. Amid the catastrophe, humans broke through the limits of their bodies and began to evolve. On August 27, in the year 2860 of the Old Era, the life intensity of all adults reached level 2. That day marked the end of the Old Era and the beginning of a new age, the first day of the High Martial Calendar. The second question concerns key figures who made major contributions during the First War of the High Martial Era. The third question discusses the erroneous policies proposed by various countries regarding the restoration of world order. After answering all the questions, he immediately submits the exam. He rubs his head, looking somewhat dejected, but in truth, he is thinking that, as expected, his score should be perfect. He was never actually in a coma for 2 years. Instead, due to a mysterious injury, he repeatedly entered a strange space. The rewards he obtained there awakened his mental power and granted him a photographic memory. Thus, even though he had not attended school for 2 years, his confidence remained intact. Unfortunately, the total score for academics is only 225 points. He still needs to prepare thoroughly for the martial arts exam. After class, he returns home and informs his father that he is back. His father replies that it is perfect timing and dinner is already ready. As Chen walks toward his father, a piece of paper falls from his pocket. His mother picks it up and scolds him for being too clumsy, reminding him to make sure he does not lose his exam administration ticket. At the dining table, his father lays out the dishes. After a moment, he places something on the table and asks Chen if he knows what it is. Chen is shocked to recognize it as qi blood powder. He immediately asks where his father got it. Instead of answering directly, his father smiles and says that since Chen is taking the Hongji class exam, he bought the qi blood powder to help improve his score. Chen says that he can pass even without it. His father places a hand on his shoulder and tells him not to worry. Even if he does not become a martial artist, the family can still support him. There is always a way to make a living. Hearing this, Chen smiles and nods. That night, Chen enters his room and sits on the bed. His thoughts are heavy. One bottle of qi blood powder costs 20,000, nearly draining the family's savings. In these times, if he does not become a martial artist, he cannot guarantee his family's safety. The outcome of tomorrow's exam depends on this very night. He begins to meditate. A blue flame forms in his palms, and his consciousness is drawn into another space, a frozen world surrounded by crystal. Moments later, monsters appear behind him. Since the time he fell into a coma, whenever he sleeps, he enters the crystal space. In this space, countless monsters exist with only one goal: to destroy the crystal, and his duty is to stop them. If the crystal is destroyed, he will fall into a coma again. But if he dies in battle while protecting it, he will immediately awaken in the real world, brimming with energy. At first, he was afraid to gamble with his life, so he repeatedly failed and fell into comas. Later, he discovered that dying in battle granted abundant energy. With each successful defense against a wave of monsters, his mental power increased slightly. As a result, his memory and comprehension became extraordinarily strong. After defeating a massive ape, notifications appear one after another, announcing that the next wave of monsters will arrive in 30 seconds. This is followed by a reminder that only the first successful defense grants rewards. One by one, he beheads the monsters with his sharp sword glowing with red energy. When it is over, he slowly walks away, leaving the corpses behind him. He lets out a sigh and opens his status panel. As he examines it, he realizes that his current stats are still not enough to enter the Hongxi class and become an elite martial artist. Immediately after, a notification appears announcing the arrival of the fifth wave of monsters. From the air, a gigantic red dragon appears, raging with fury, and immediately breathes out blazing flames. Chen dodges quickly, knowing full well that this is the monster's fire breath. Before he can regain his footing, it attacks again with its sharp claws. Seizing the opportunity, he leaps toward the dragon's arm. However, before he can climb up, the dragon suddenly strikes with a powerful tail sweep. He blocks it with his sword, spinning through the air until he lands above the monster. As blue energy envelops his entire body, he realizes that after experiencing countless deaths, he has finally mastered the dragon's attack patterns and rhythm. He unleashes the flowing light sword art, breeze in the forest. Wrapped in blue energy, he crashes downward and strikes the dragon directly in the abdomen. The dragon slams into the ground, letting out a scream of intense pain. Chen stands atop its body, gripping his trembling arm, thinking the monster might go berserk again. He made a brief miscalculation, but fortunately, he is not seriously injured. The dragon attacks once more, but he dodges swiftly. He forces himself to calm down, because he knows that this time, he will definitely win. After dodging, he jumped again and shot upward, landing directly on top of the dragon. He tried once more to attack the monster while gripping his sword tightly. However, the dragon seemed to anticipate his movement and immediately prepared to bite him. With a swift twist of his body, he narrowly avoided the danger. Before he could fully retreat, the dragon launched another attack, its strike nearly brushing his face. Even so, at extreme speed, he managed to evade it once again. What followed was the dragon's eruption of blazing flames, forcing him to retreat immediately. At that moment, he realized that no matter how powerful his opponent was, having a smaller body still came with advantages, one of them being speed. Using all his strength, he hurled his sword. It shot through the air at incredible speed, flying upward and striking the dragon squarely on the head. The monster let out a scream of intense pain as flames continued to pour from its mouth. He did not stop there. In an instant, he appeared behind the dragon and slashed down with all his strength, cutting from its head down along its back, shouting out his skill, drums and gongs beating loudly. After that, he thrust his sword with full force into the dragon's back. A burst of blue energy exploded, streaking upward into the sky and completely piercing through the monster's body. The dragon crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom. Yet even after it fell, he did not let his guard down. The protagonist unleashed another extremely powerful slash at the dragon's body. Then he left his sword embedded in the monster and stood silently behind it. At that moment, a notification appeared. It congratulated him. He had successfully defended against 5 waves of monster attacks, and as a result, his mental power level increased by 1. But that was not all. Another notification appeared. Because he had successfully completed 5 consecutive waves, he obtained the Void Immortal Visualization method. Chen was shocked. As for the increase in mental power, he had little to comment on, but a visualization method was a completely different matter. He recalled the explanation from before. A visualization method was an extremely rare technique that allowed one to actively cultivate mental power. Even if he could raise its level through system rewards, a method that could be used continuously was far more valuable. Another notification appeared, reminding him to prepare, as the next wave of monsters was approaching. Calmly, he turned around while catching his breath, then suddenly froze. His eyes widened as countless gigantic monsters came into view, each with glowing red eyes. The sight alone nearly overwhelmed him. It took him a moment before he fully opened his eyes again. He realized that all of them had higher life intensity levels than his, and there were far too many of them. It seemed he would not be able to pass this stage anytime soon. Because of this, he decided to temporarily set aside the battle and prioritize the visualization method. He took out the glowing book. Blue energy flowed out from it and streamed directly into his head. In an instant, he was transported into a strange dimension, standing alone and gazing upward. Before him was a terrifying existence, smiling, with small yet intensely red eyes. It was so enormous that he was no more than an ant by comparison, as if he could be crushed at any moment. As his body and face seemed to be suppressed by its presence, he suddenly understood. So this was why it was called a visualization method. All he needed to do was stare at the gigantic being. This was a trial. A mental trial. He remained in that state for several minutes. When his consciousness returned, he was already sitting on his bed, wrapped in a gentle blue energy. Moments later, the door to his room suddenly burst open. His younger sister called out to him, telling him that it was time to eat. Chen began changing his clothes, as his entire body was drenched in sweat from training. Jokingly, his sister said that he seemed more handsome now. Chen Du smiled and walked over, messing up her hair as he asked whether he had not always been handsome. His sister repeatedly nodded and begged him to stop messing with her hair. Her cheeks flushed red as she looked at her older brother. While looking in the mirror, Chen Du noticed changes in his body. Only then did he realize that this was likely the effect of the void immortal visualization method. After breakfast, he prepared to leave for the exam. He said goodbye to his father and younger sister. His father advised him to be careful on the way. The scene shifted to Liang City number 1 high school gymnasium. Chen Du was stretching while thinking about how effective the void immortal visualization method was. He could clearly feel improvements in every aspect of his body. Suddenly, he turned around when someone spoke behind him, calling him the genius. Chen Du, who had supposedly suspended his studies for 2 years. 3 teenage bullies stood in front of him, grinning, and their leader said that Chen Du had ranked dead last before taking leave. Did he really still have the nerve to participate in the Hongji class assessment? In a mocking tone, they asked whether the great philanthropist was here to take the very last spot. Chen Du replied seriously that it was still better than someone who could not even pass the academic subjects. One of the bullies flew into a rage and shouted, asking what he had just said. Chen Du merely smiled and replied that if he could not hear clearly, then he was not qualified to take the exam. The leader of the bullies was furious and warned him not to be too arrogant. Chen Du calmly replied that he had not named anyone. If it was not him, then there was no need to take it personally. Another boy stepped in to stop them, saying that the assessment was more important. If something happened and Instructor Ling arrived, they would lose much more. The bullies left in annoyance, but their leader threatened that he would come back for him later. The boy who intervened was nervous and said he was finished for sure, but Chen Du calmly said it was fine. The boy explained that Feng Rui was arrogant because his second uncle was the dean of student affairs. He also added that there were rumors that the dean had leaked the martial arts assessment questions to Feng Rui. Only then did Chen Du realize that he needed to be cautious of Feng Rui's schemes and those of certain teachers. Soon, it was announced that the martial arts assessment would be divided into a strength test and a combat duel. The examinees were split into groups of 10. Chen Du immediately lined up and told the boy behind him that the exam was about to begin. When they arrived at the strength test area, a massive device shaped like a giant bear stood before them, with the words, "Number 1," written on it. A last-place elimination system was implemented. Everyone had to strike the sandbag with full force. The one with the lowest score would be eliminated. The boy beside Chen Du complained about the sandbag attack. The last place in each group would be eliminated immediately. He said the strength test this year was excessively unfair. Chen Du remained silent, thinking that there was still a combat duel afterward and that he needed to conserve his strength. Using his speed, he gathered power in his fist and prepared for a powerful punch. Meanwhile, Feng Rui arrogantly said that this was easy and that he still had plenty of strength left. When the assessment began, both Chen Du and Feng Rui prepared themselves with determination. Feng Rui attacked first. His punch was powerful, and the sound echoed loudly, delighting his followers. They even boasted that it had almost reached 1,400 jin in strength. They were certain that their boss would take first place and believed that someone would be eliminated in this round. However, the bullies suddenly broke into a cold sweat when they heard an even louder booming sound and saw the punching bag fly up into the air. Some of them cursed in shock, asking what was going on. They could not believe that it had reached 1,500 jin of punching power, and from someone with only unpassed 5.1 life intensity. They wondered which class Chen Du belonged to. Was he really that strong? Why was his name not in the top 50 of the batch last year? Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at Chen Du. The boy jumped up in excitement and shouted. This was exactly what he had expected from his big brother. In his heart, he could not help but wonder, since when had Chen Du become this overpowered? The teacher observing the exam could not help but think deeply. According to standard benchmarks, A life intensity of 5.1 corresponded to only about 1000 jin of punching force. Yet Chen Du had recorded 1500 jin. Even within the Hongji class, almost no one could achieve such a result. His doubts grew stronger. Could there really be such a monster coming from an ordinary class? The possibility that Chen Du possessed a martial skill crossed his mind, but he immediately dismissed it. Even that would not be enough to explain such a huge gap. He stopped dwelling on it and promptly instructed his assistant to retrieve Chen Du's file. After reviewing the records, he learned that Chen Du was a student from a regular class who had suspended his studies for 2 years. The file stated that his martial skill had reached Tier 1, 55% back then. However, the teacher was certain that Chen Du's current level was far higher. He decided that in the afternoon, he would closely observe Chen Du's true strength. After the strength test, the teacher stood at the center of the ring and loudly announced that the students whose names were called should step onto the stage for the combat duel. The first name called was Chen Du, followed by Feng Rui. The students were shocked. Even though Chen Du had only just returned to school, his score in the strength test was extremely high. Some wondered whether he had a chance of winning. However, others quickly replied that it was impossible. Feng Rui was bound to win. In real combat, martial skill was what truly mattered. Brute strength alone was not enough. At the center of the stage, as the two prepared, Feng Rui arrogantly told Chen Du not to think that just because he had beaten him before, things would be the same now. Chen Du smiled and, in a faintly mocking tone, replied that he hoped Feng Rui would still be able to remain arrogant later. Feng Rui moved immediately. He leapt forward and used his martial arts stops war, launching an extremely fast series of attacks. Chen Du calmly dodged each movement. He blocked the final strike with his sword. With just a few simple moves, he managed to land a hit, striking Feng Rui in the face and causing his nose to bleed. The force of the blow nearly knocked Feng Rui backward, sending him skidding across the floor. Feng Rui burned with rage. In his mind, he was the one who deserved to enter the Hongji class. His eyes reddened with fury as crimson energy enveloped his body. He launched another attack, the technique he called well-preserved reputation. Bursts of energy shot out in succession like threads, flying toward Chen Du. Chen Du dodged and blocked them one by one with his sword. Feng Rui leapt again and unleashed a powerful slash, shouting for Chen Du to die. Part of the stage was shattered by the force of the attack, yet Chen Du suffered only minor damage, barely more than a scratch. Chen Du realized that fighting a human was completely different from battling monsters in the crystal space. Feng Rui once again gathered energy in his hand and swiftly released a devastating blast. Chen Du met it head-on with his sword, which glowed with blue light. Their attacks collided, causing a violent explosion and a deafening shockwave that echoed through the area. Immediately after, Chen Du suddenly unleashed a flurry of attacks. Feng Rui was caught off guard. His weapon was nearly knocked from his hands. A powerful wave of blue energy swept past him. Behind Feng Rui, a leaf drifted gently downward, but in an instant, Chen Du sliced through it. That single slash inflicted severe damage on Feng Rui, and blood spurted out. Even so, Feng Rui refused to give up. He pulled out a dagger from his side and charged forward again, attempting to stab Chen Du. But before he could succeed, Chen Du delivered a heavy punch straight to his face. Feng Rui was sent flying off the stage, nearly losing consciousness. All the students were stunned. Some even wondered if they were dreaming. The boy accompanying Chen Du was completely dumbfounded. He never imagined that the dark horse would be his own big brother. The students behind them could hardly believe their eyes. Some cursed under their breath, while others whispered, asking whether Chen Du had taken drugs. The teacher immediately ordered the medical team to check on Feng Rui's condition, while instructing the next students to prepare for their duels. As Chen Du was about to leave, Instructor Ling stopped him. Ling approached him, and Chen Du immediately bowed, explaining that he had been in a hurry earlier and had not fully controlled his strength, so he apologized. Instructor Ling smiled and said that injuries were normal in combat duels. He advised Chen Du to be more careful next time and not to forget to stretch after returning home, as it was obvious that he had exerted himself in the fight. Chen Du thanked him and left. As Instructor Ling watched him go, he thought to himself that Feng Rui had been utterly defeated, yet Chen Du did not have even a single visible injury, clearly the result of an overwhelming gap in martial skill. The teacher instructed Wang Kai to call the principal, who responded immediately. After that, Chen Du walked toward the virtual combat capsule. It was still early, and his father and younger sister had not yet returned home. In his mind, even though he did not have a permanent sparring partner, it was fortunate that the school had such facilities. By lying inside the capsule, he could be matched with martial artists of a similar level. Since he usually fought monsters in the crystal space, he had rarely used the virtual combat system, so his rank was still only bronze. He plugged the capsule into the outlet, thinking that Feng Rui's humiliation would definitely not end here. Feng Rui would likely send people to harass him and try to stop him from entering the Hongji class. He quietly sat down and activated the virtual capsule. Combat records here were automatically registered in the Blue Star Youth List, an official ranking used for college and transfer examinations, and a recognized list of geniuses across all ecospheres of the world. Even within the Hongji class, only a few students were on this list. Thus, if he could enter it, he would surely gain an opportunity to enter the Hongji class through sheer strength. Upon entering the virtual space, he immediately put on a mask, a pig mask. He appeared in a vast open area and looked around, wondering where his opponent was. He did not realize that the opponent was already above him. A voice spoke, saying that his reaction was too slow. A woman dropped down from above, holding 2 daggers, ready to attack. Chen Du immediately blocked the woman's sudden attack. In a smooth and practiced motion, he parried her attack with his sword, enough to redirect the strike and prevent a direct hit. As a result, his opponent quickly retreated. The woman distanced herself, letting out a slight laugh, clearly pleased with Chen Du's reaction. She praised his quick reflexes, but at the same time warned him, this was not a school test. In a real battle, there was no need to wait to clearly see the opponent, much less to greet them before attacking. Those words struck Chen Du. Determined, he readied his sword. From its blade, a blue light gradually emerged, accompanied by the surge of intense martial presence. He firmly told the woman that he had learned his lesson, and this time, he would not give her another chance to attack stealthily. In an instant, he acted. He swiftly swung his sword, drawing a clear and bright blue wave of energy through the air. The woman easily avoided his consecutive attacks, each movement effortless. Yet on Chen Du's final swing, the sword's edge nearly passed across her face. Without hesitation, she suddenly shifted her position and used the pale dragon point thrust. The woman was surprised, questioning whether that was truly the pale dragon point thrust. It was clearly a piercing strike, but Chen Du executed it as if it were a continuation of the previous motion, not as a separate attack. The woman then kicked Chen Du with full force, sending him flying backward. While doing so, she sternly told him that the flowing light sword art should not be confined to a single form. One must contemplate the essence of the martial art itself. As he flew through the air, Chen Du reflected on her words. She was right. Why had he limited his sword's movements to one form? Yet he couldn't help but wonder how she knew his sword technique. He dodged her next rapid attack, but this time his pig-shaped mask was torn. In the blink of an eye, the woman appeared before him and firmly warned him not to lose focus. It was then that Chen Du fully realized the strength of his opponent. He could not even discern what foundational martial arts she had studied. He tried to meet the next attack head-on, but once again, the woman changed her position. She appeared above him, preparing another strike. She attacked with purple energy, fast and fierce, scolding him for being careless. Chen Du could only curse silently in his mind, calling her a cheating camper. At the same moment, a system window appeared. He had been defeated, losing 10 victory points. Sitting in the virtual space, he seriously reflected on what had happened. He knew that if it were purely a matter of raw strength, he had a chance to win. But his opponent had chosen stealthy attacks. Slowly, he removed his mask and told himself he needed to rethink his martial arts approach. The flowing light sword art had 4 forms, and at present, he had yet to fully control the pale dragon point thrust as a pure piercing move. Its nature was close to that of an assassin, silent, sudden, and lethal. That was when he had an idea. An assassin excelled at stealth attacks, secret and unexpected movements. He realized that his fighting style had been too direct. He wanted to try this new perspective in a real battle. Once again, he pressed the holographic keyboard. A massive man appeared before him, holding a chain with a large iron ball at the end. Chen smiled bitterly. He had just come from a fight against a sneak attacker, and now he faced a natural counter to his weapon. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of godlike matchmaking system this was. Yet he did not hesitate. He ran swiftly, preparing to strike. His sword glowed blue once more, and with full confidence, he unleashed his martial arts. In front of the giant man, his speed and technique were clearly evident. He swung his sword, leaving a blue wave of energy, and shouted, painting the ground as a prison. It struck the man's abdomen but was insufficient to cause serious damage. He immediately followed with an upward sword swing, using golden drums ringing to the heavens, striking the opponent's head directly. The giant man shouted in anger and told Chen that this was not how one used a sword. He warned Chen not to assume that just because he was slightly stronger, he could do whatever he wished. He swung his weapon and hurled the large iron ball toward Chen with full force. Chen showed no fear. As the iron ball approached, he calmly asked if that was really the case. Before the weapon could strike, he activated Breeze in the forest. He pierced the iron ball repeatedly, and due to his strength and speed, the weapon nearly bounced back toward the giant man. In a sudden motion, Chen was on top of his opponent, his sword pointed at the man's neck. The man was shocked, questioning if Chen hadn't just been standing in front of him moments ago. Before he could react, Chen, without hesitation, used the pale dragon point thrust. He thrust his sword with full force, wrapped in blue energy, straight into the opponent's neck. A system notification appeared. He had won against Wang Dachui and received 10 victory points. After the battle, he reappeared in the virtual space, unable to believe what had just happened. It was the first time he had successfully executed the pale dragon point thrust in a real fight. He finally understood why mastery of the sword did not mean sticking to a single form. True skill lay in adaptability. One could be firm or soft, exposed or hidden, move like lightning or flow smoothly and continuously. As the final form of the flowing light sword art, the pale dragon point thrust had taught him an important lesson. The sword could be used openly and honorably, but it could also be silent and deceptive. He smiled quietly as he observed his sword and softly told himself. The sword is a weapon without a fixed form. A system notification appeared, congratulating him. His skill had clearly improved. The flowing light sword art rose from Tier 1, 89% to Tier 1, 90%. More notifications appeared. His flowing light sword art had again improved. Seeing these messages repeatedly, Chen realized that real battles deepened his understanding and skill. Every attack, every defense, every movement carried a new lesson. Thus, within the virtual space, he wished to fight again and again, striving to understand the essence of the flowing light sword art. His battle continued until he felt hunger. At that moment, his bracelet suddenly vibrated. Another notification appeared. He was congratulated for entering the top 10,000 of the Blue Star Youth list. Chen could not believe what he saw. His name was listed on the Blue Star Youth list, an honor he had not expected. He immediately requested the system to display all the details of his Blue Star Youth list. The data appeared. His ranking was 6,219th. But that was not all. On the 7th Biosphere Youth list, he was ranked 654th. On the Giant Bear Realm Youth List, 55th. On the Purple Cloud District Youth List, 7th. On the Liang City Youth List, he was listed first. Chen Du was overjoyed. He had not expected that after acquiring the Pale Dragon Point Thrust, he would become number 1 on the Liang City Youth List. This guaranteed his spot in the Hongxi class, a class for elite students with potential to become the strongest. The scene shifted outside Liang City number 1 high school. Many students were walking toward the school, including Chen Du. He suddenly froze as someone called his name. A teacher, visibly furious, approached and scolded him loudly. Did he not know how to greet a teacher? Where was his manners? The teacher was Feng Ligyu, dean of students at Liang City number 1 high school and the second uncle of Feng Rui. Chen Du was shocked but quickly offered a proper greeting. Good day, teacher. In his mind, he wondered, who was this man? The teacher approached, pointing at him, saying that in the new semester he would conduct a general inspection of students' attire and conduct. He asked Chen Du what he was wearing. He answered seriously, the school uniform. Students nearly stifled their laughter. Some even commented that Chen Du might be in trouble because of the teacher's anger. They knew Feng Rui had not yet left the hospital, and his second uncle would surely seek revenge. They had also heard rumors that Chen Du had won because he allegedly took banned substances, making his victory deserved. A student could not believe it, thinking Chen Du must be extremely strong. The furious teacher pointed at Chen Du's uniform, shouting that it was unacceptable. Chen Du calmly explained that everything was in accordance with school regulations. The teacher would not accept this, screaming angrily and suddenly swinging his stick. Chen Du immediately caught it with his hand. The teacher continued shouting, saying that Chen Du was defying discipline, opposing a teacher, and would be reported to the principal for expulsion. Amid the tension, someone suddenly asked, who is looking for him? Everyone turned toward the two approaching men. One was Li Mu, principal of Liang City number 1 high school, and the other was Wang Angquan, the mayor of Liang City. The teacher hurriedly pointed Chen Du out to the principal, but he was ignored. Li Mu immediately approached Chen Du politely and asked if he was indeed Chen Du. Chen Du nodded in response. He spoke respectfully as the principal explained that they had come specifically to see him. The principal also introduced Mayor Wang, who directly placed a hand on Chen Du's shoulder as a sign of respect. Chen Du bowed to both the mayor and the principal, then asked if he could know why they were looking for him. The mayor explained that Chen Du had become number 1 on the Liang City Youth List and had entered the top 10,000 of the Blue Star Youth List. They needed to see what kind of talent he possessed. The mayor joked with a laugh, what kind of monster is this? The teacher and the students were utterly shocked. They could not believe that Chen Du had entered the Blue Star Youth List in the top 10,000, a feat exceeding everyone's expectations. The entire school was thrown into shock when the news was finally confirmed. Chen Du was one of the rare few, 1 in 10,000, officially listed on the Blue Star Youth List. The announcement spread across the campus like lightning, leaving students frozen in disbelief. In that moment, everyone finally understood just how powerful Chen Du truly was. From the strength he had displayed, it was clear that he no longer needed any kind of enhancement to defeat Feng Rui. In a single instant, everything was overturned. The class that had once been mocked and dismissed as weak was completely humiliated. Because of this sudden turn of events, Chen Du was immediately summoned by the principal and instructed to report to the meeting room. There was an important matter to discuss. After the meeting, he was informed that he would officially return to the morning class. Teacher Ling would personally explain what Chen Du had learned the previous day and oversee his formal transfer. When the teacher who had belittled him earlier heard this news, they collapsed into a chair, shock and anxiety written plainly across their face. Inside the meeting room, the students respectfully greeted the mayor and the principal. The guests were then introduced. Senior students from Liang City number 2 High School and Liang City number 1 High School. Among them were Lu Bo and Morit, both well-known figures on the youth list. For a brief moment, their eyes met Chen Du's. None of them recognized one another, yet an unmistakable tension filled the air the instant their gazes crossed. The mayor spoke directly and laid out the plan. 100 cities under the Purple Cloud District would hold a large-scale competition for high school seniors. Each city would send its 3 strongest students, selected based on official data recorded at 6 o'clock the previous evening. The tournament would be overseen by a martial artist above level 15 and hosted at City Number 1 High School. The mayor went on to explain that the top 10 participants of the 100 Cities War would receive significant rewards, bonus points for the college entrance exam and substantial cash prizes, starting at 10 points and 100,000 yuan. As Chen listened, his expression grew serious. He was beginning to grasp the true weight of this competition. The mayor asked who was willing to participate. Morit questioned why virtual combat would not be used. The mayor explained that real combat was far more effective, and martial artists would be present to ensure safety. Participants would wear specialized protective suits and use standardized life intensity levels. Even so, the danger could not be completely eliminated. In his mind, Chen calculated quickly. At his current level, he was already within the top 20 of the entire district, and with his rapid progress, reaching the top 3 was not impossible. The mayor added that even failing to reach the top 10 would still be valuable, as the experience would allow them to measure their strength against their peers. There was no need to place excessive pressure on themselves. Without hesitation, Chen declared that he would participate. Lu Bo and Morit followed, both choosing to join as well. The mayor was pleased and emphasized that true heroes are forged in youth. He informed them that they would be notified once the departure schedule was confirmed and dismissed them to return to class. As Chen walked back to the classroom, he remained deep in thought. He knew that if he could place within the top 3 of the 100 Cities War, his parents would no longer have to exhaust themselves working from morning until night. With that in mind, his goal became crystal clear. No matter what, he had to reach the top 3. When he arrived at the Hongji class, he immediately noticed that the desks and seats were no longer assigned by name, unlike his previous class. He sat down in an empty seat, but before he could settle in, a large student suddenly shouted at him and ordered him to move. The student grabbed Chen by the shoulder and demanded to know who he was and whether he was worthy of sitting there. Chen looked up at the towering figure and couldn't help thinking it felt like a bear had wandered into the classroom. The student's name was Pang Hu, one of the top 10 students in the Hongji class. Chen slammed his hand down on the desk, a quiet but unmistakable warning. He met Pang Hu's gaze head-on, fearless, which clearly caught Pang Hu off guard. Chen couldn't help wondering what era this was, and whether such blatant bullying still existed in schools. Before the situation could escalate further, a hand suddenly appeared between them. Morit stepped in calmly and reminded Pang Hu that it was Chen first day and that he wasn't yet familiar with the rules of the Hongji class. Chen quietly assessed Pang Hu's strength and realized that his life intensity was at least 2 levels higher. Pang Hu sneered and remarked that Chen had simply gotten lucky, allowing him to walk away for now. After Pang Hu left, Morit explained the class system. In the Hongji class, power hierarchy was determined by seat number. Every month, real combat battles were held to rank students, and those in the bottom 10 were forced to stand throughout class for an entire month. Only then did Chen fully understand how brutal the competition within the honors class truly was. Although the seat rankings for the month had already been set, Chen was informed that he would be allowed to issue a challenge to obtain a seat number. When he asked whether there were benefits beyond simply sitting, he was told that rankings determined the monthly resource subsidy. The higher the rank, the greater the rewards. That made the challenge worthwhile. When the instructor arrived, Chen was ordered to report to the combat room. The rules were explained clearly. A challenger could issue up to 3 challenges, and the seat number would be decided through real combat results. Without hesitation, Chen raised his hand and declared that he would challenge the 10th seat. The instructor froze, and the entire class erupted in shock. On his very first day, he was challenging a top 10 position. To many, It seemed like reckless confidence. Yet for Chen Du, the reason was simple. The resource subsidy for 10th place was 50% higher than that of 11th. The risk was worth taking. Pang Hu stepped forward with a laugh, mocking Chen Du and telling him not to cry when he lost. Chen Du calmly confirmed whether Pang Hu was indeed ranked 10th, and Pang Hu answered without hesitation. The instructor ordered Pang Hu to put on his protective gear and enter the arena. As the instructor watched Chen Du, he couldn't help thinking that the boy seemed overly eager to prove himself. But sometimes, it was precisely this kind of hardship that forged a true warrior. Inside the arena, Chen Du and Pang Hu stood facing each other. At the signal to begin, the battle officially started, the first true trial of Chen Du within the world of the Hongji class, a place where strength alone ruled everything. With a smug grin, Pang Hu asked whether Chen Du was ready. His voice dripped with mockery as he told Chen Du to prepare himself. Soon enough, he'd be hugging Pang Hu's leg, crying and begging for mercy. Chen Du's reply was cold and brief. As a faint blue aura began to seep from his body, he simply said, "Let's see." In the next instant, Pang Hu moved. His massive weapon swung forward at terrifying speed, the strike aimed straight at Chen Du's face. Before the blow could fully land, Pang Hu shouted arrogantly, declaring that Chen Du's reaction was far too slow. That shout sent unease through the watching students. One by one, they began analyzing the fight. From their observations, Chen Du's life intensity was a full level lower than Pang Hu's. In battles like this, even a 0.1 gap could determine victory, let alone an entire level. To them, the fight was already over. Chen Du was guaranteed to lose. Yet amid the ridicule, Teacher Lim noticed something strange. His gaze sharpened as he carefully examined Chen Du's data. Chen Du's life intensity had reached 5.2. That shocked him. Just yesterday, it had been 5.1. Only one day had passed. How could it increase so quickly? Meanwhile, Pang Hu laughed loudly, confidently declaring Chen Du defeated. He swung his weapon again with full force. But suddenly, his expression changed. He felt nothing connect. Startled, Pang Hu looked down. There stood Chen Du, steady, calm, and already positioned to counterattack. A brief silence followed. Then Chen Du smiled faintly. In the next instant, he unleashed his move. Pale Dragon Point Thrust. A sharp, explosive burst of blue energy erupted from Chen Du's body, slamming directly into Pang Hu's massive frame. The impact sent Pang Hu flying through the air before he crashed heavily onto the ground. The crowd froze. Immediately, Teacher Lim grabbed Chen Du's arm. Shock was written all over his face as he recognized the technique. He demanded to know whether Chen Du's martial skill had already reached Tier 1 Perfect. Chen Du calmly explained that he had simply gotten lucky and broken through last night. But to Teacher Lim, that explanation was even more terrifying. Advancing nearly 10% overnight was nothing short of unbelievable. Teacher Lim snapped out of his thoughts when Chen Du gestured toward the hand still gripping his arm. With an embarrassed sigh, the teacher let go and straightened himself. Then, in a loud, firm voice, he announced the result. Chen Du wins. The entire room erupted in disbelief. Winning despite being a full level lower was already shocking, but defeating his opponent with a single attack was beyond imagination. Even more, it hadn't expected Chen Du to be a late-blooming genius. Because of his victory, Chen Du claimed seat number 10. Teacher Lim asked if he wanted to continue challenging higher seats, but Chen Du declined. Even if he climbed a few more ranks, the increase in resources wouldn't be significant. Conserving his strength was the smarter choice. After the battle, Morid and several students rushed over, asking to add Chen Du on WeChat for easier communication. Though confused, Chen Du accepted. Even Pang Hu, who had been so arrogant earlier, suddenly humbled himself. He hugged Chen Du's leg, apologized repeatedly, and begged him not to take his earlier words to heart. Chen Du said nothing. In his mind, Pang Hu was simply someone who knew when to bow, and when to stand tall. What Chen Du didn't notice, however, was Teacher Lim's serious gaze, fixed firmly on him. Suddenly, Teacher Lim called Chen Du over and told him to come to the office after class. After class ended, the scene shifted to the principal's office. A knock sounded. The principal called them in. Teacher Lim entered first, followed by Chen Du. Without wasting time, Teacher Lim asked whether Mount Everest Martial Arts University and Mount Tai Martial Arts University still had slots available for early special admission within their ecospheres. The principal was startled. He invited them to sit before asking why Teacher Lim brought this up. Teacher Lim explained that he wanted Chen Du to attempt the early special admission path. The principal reminded them that both universities were among the top 8 famous schools. The minimum requirement was clear: Tier 1 perfect martial skill. Chen Du was still 1% short. That last 1% was an extremely difficult threshold to cross. But Teacher Lim insisted on trying. After all, the school had an instrument capable of measuring martial skill precisely. With a sigh, the principal remarked that Teacher Lim was as stubborn as ever. Still, he pointed to the instrument and explained that its maximum detection limit was Tier 1 high stage, more than enough for testing. Teacher Lim instructed Chen Du to repeat the attack he used during the seat-ranking battle. Chen Du calmed himself and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he stepped forward, tightened his grip, and unleashed Pale Dragon Point Thrust. A terrifying surge of blue energy exploded outward. A violent blast echoed through the room. The instrument shattered completely. The principal turned pale as the device's head flew off and nearly struck him. He stared in disbelief at the wreckage. Teacher Lim explained that he hadn't expected this either. Just yesterday, Chen Du had still been Tier 1 high stage. But overnight, he broke through. He was now fully Tier 1 perfect. Chen Du quickly apologized for destroying the instrument. But Teacher Lim waved it off, declaring that Chen Du was a true combat genius. His battle instincts were terrifying, as if he had been forged through countless life and death struggles. In all of Teacher Lim's years of teaching, he had never encountered a student with such presence. Those words sent a chill through Chen Du. From that moment on, the principal designated him as a priority student. His training resources were temporarily raised to seat number 1 level, and the school planned to endorse him for early special admission through the 100 Cities Hegemony tournament. As long as he placed in the top 3, his admission would be almost guaranteed. Chen Du asked what early special admission meant. Teacher Lim explained that the normal college entrance exam required a life intensity of at least 6.5, nearly impossible to reach in such a short time. But through special admission, reaching Tier 1 perfect 1 month before the exam was enough. After the tournament, professors from Mount Everest and Mount Tai would personally conduct the assessment. Chen Du then asked whether he could still take the normal entrance exam even if he passed special admission. When asked which university he preferred, he quietly named Mount Huang Martial Arts University. The teachers were surprised. Resource-wise, the top 8 schools were nearly identical. Chen Du then explained why. 6 years ago, the giant race attacked the Cloud Thunder district of Lake West City. Even after the City Defense Corps arrived, manpower was insufficient. The result was hundreds of thousands of deaths. All Chen Du wanted was for his family to live safely and peacefully. And if disaster ever struck Liang City, he wanted to be close enough to return immediately, to save them. At that moment, Teacher Lim understood. Such thoughts usually came from those who had already lost their families. But Chen Du, still young, with his family intact, already carried this sense of responsibility. And then Teacher Lim realized. Chen Du was someone capable of bearing immense responsibility. Chen Du explained that he had been considering the 2 schools as backup options. If he failed to enter Mount Huang Martial Arts University, he thought he could enroll in one of them instead. However, the principal immediately told him that this wasn't possible. Once he chose the early special admission route, he would be required to sign a binding agreement with the school, locking in his enrollment. At that moment, Teacher Ling gently placed a hand on Chen Du's shoulder and clarified the situation. If Chen Du managed to place in the 100 Cities Hegemony tournament 1 month later, admission into those 2 schools would be almost guaranteed. The calculations had already been done for him. With early special admission, the required score could even be lowered by an additional 100 points. However, if he chose not to take early special admission, the conditions would be far harsher. His life intensity would need to reach at least 6.5, and his college entrance exam score could only be reduced by a maximum of 30 points. Based on past experience, Teacher Ling advised him not to gamble with his future. Chen Du smiled lightly, thanked both the teacher and the principal, and said he would think carefully before deciding. After the discussion ended, he walked out through the school gates. As he made his way home, his thoughts became clear. Early special admission wouldn't begin until after the 100 Cities Hegemony tournament, which was still more than a month away. From now until the college entrance exam, he planned to live inside the exclusive martial arts training room provided by the school and focus entirely on strengthening himself. During that time, he also intended to test whether medical methods could accelerate the growth of his life intensity. He knew the necessary resources were available. After all, they belonged to the Technology Martial Palace. Within the High Martial Civilization, 3 supreme forces worked together to safeguard humanity's future. The first was the Extreme Martial Palace, responsible for confronting alien civilizations. The second was the Technology Martial Palace, which enhanced humanity's overall strength. The third was the Martial Artist Alliance, tasked with maintaining social order among humans. The Technology Martial Palace had been founded by Durags, recognized as the second strongest individual in the entire civilization. Though his combat power was inferior to Yan, no one could deny his immense contributions to humanity's progress. When Chen Du arrived at a Technology Martial Palace outlet, a woman greeted him politely and asked how she could assist him. Calmly, he stated that he wished to purchase 3 boxes of Thunder Chi blood pills. The woman explained that the pills couldn't be sold directly. Buyers had to pass an endurance test first and invited him to follow her. Chen Du hesitated briefly. He knew the Thunder Chi blood pills were among the best Chi blood medicines available to ordinary people before becoming full martial artists, but they came with serious risks. Once consumed, the medicinal effect turned into lightning that surged through the meridians. If the user failed to maintain intense concentration for 30 minutes, the lightning could spiral out of control and cause severe danger. That was why the endurance test was mandatory. When asked if he was ready, Chen Du answered calmly that he was. He placed his hand on a large testing screen. The woman turned away to initiate the process, then suddenly froze, shock flashing across her face as she stared at the display. Moments later, Chen Du could be seen leaving, while the woman hurriedly contacted the technical department, reporting a possible malfunction in the testing machine. The scene shifted to Chen Du's private martial arts room. He carefully read the instructions on the medicine he had purchased. 1 pill per day for 10 consecutive days constituted a single cycle. At most, 3 pills could be taken at once, still counting as one 10-day cycle. A warning was clearly stated. Taking 3 pills simultaneously would cause pain 5 times greater than a single pill. Regardless of dosage, the effect would last 30 minutes. After 3 to 5 cycles, antibodies would form, and the medicine's effectiveness would gradually weaken. Chen Du realized that the endurance test he had taken earlier represented only half the pain of a single pill, almost trivial. Taking 3 pills at once would mean pain 10 times greater. Even so, he believed he could endure it. Without hesitation, he swallowed all 3 pills. The moment the medicine took effect, his eyes widened. Violent lightning surged through his entire body. He clenched his teeth and endured the unbearable pain. Eventually, the lightning faded, though his body continued to tremble. Only then did he realize it was over. He took a deep breath, drenched in sweat. A notification appeared. Life intensity increased from 5.2 to 5.3. A smile spread across his face. He was now only 1 step away from 6.5. As his life intensity continued rising at an accelerated pace, Chen Du made a decision. He would abandon the early special admission route. He had originally planned to rely on the pills for an entire month, but given his body's condition, 10 days might already be the limit. Based on the funds in his card, he could only last 55 days. That meant he had no choice but to place within the top 2 of the 100 cities hegemony tournament to secure enough funding to continue growing. Not long after, Chen collapsed onto the floor. He hadn't expected the Thunder Chi blood pills to hit so hard on the first use. The residual lightning energy left him temporarily unable to move. Since his body couldn't act, he decided to strengthen his mind instead and entered crystal space. Throughout the night, he fought green firefly giants. Although he didn't fully defeat them, his mental power increased significantly. When he returned, he stretched his hand and smiled faintly, the battle still vivid in his memory. Soon after, the school's resource subsidy arrived. Filled with anticipation, Chen headed to class. The instructor introduced a combat method for martial artists, mental power attachment. The teacher's name was Yadai, the mental power instructor of Hongji class and a member of the Martial Artist Alliance. Chen quickly realized this was a special course exclusive to Hongji class. Only students with Tier 2 mental power were qualified to learn it. He also noticed that the teacher's life intensity exceeded 15. The teacher explained that as martial skills increased, physical strength naturally improved. However, when mental power was used correctly, it could achieve twice the result with half the effort. Physical strength spread throughout the body, while mental power could concentrate excess strength at a single point, greatly increasing explosive force. The ability to mobilize every strand of strength across the body. That was the true role of mental power attachment. Chen noticed that none of the students seemed surprised. Clearly, most of them had already learned and mastered this technique. Still, the teacher reminded them that before mental power reached Tier 10, the amount of physical strength it could harness remained limited. For that reason, he didn't recommend focusing on it excessively. For high college entrance exam scores, life intensity remained the priority. Afterward, the teacher produced a short flute and announced that he would measure everyone's mental power using Song of Exhaustion. He instructed all students to stand and expressed hope that their results would surpass those of the previous semester. He also stated that Chen participation was optional and wouldn't affect his exam score. Chen was surprised. Clearly, the teacher assumed that with only Tier 1 mental power, he would fail the moment the flute sounded. Even so, Chen chose to participate. In the teacher's mind, youth were naturally competitive. Mental power wasn't something easily mastered, and many students in Hongji class struggled with it. Still, since Chen was being observed by Ling Yun, the teacher planned to offer guidance if he failed. Before beginning, the teacher instructed everyone to focus completely and use all their strength. The Song of Exhaustion would drain both body and mind simultaneously. The students responded in unison, signaling their readiness. After the entire class confirmed their agreement, Teacher Yadai slowly raised her flute and brought it to her lips. The moment the first note sounded, a deep and resonant tone filled the room, carrying an unusual sense of power. From the melody, strands of purple energy spread outward like mist, gradually expanding until the entire classroom was enveloped. Soon, a vague figure began to take shape in front of Chen. It was not completely physical, yet it carried a clear sense of threat. Within his consciousness, Chen was drawn into a mental battlefield against an opponent shaped by the teacher's power. Before he could fully assess the situation, a fierce kick rushed toward him. It nearly struck his arm, but he managed to brace himself in time. In that instant, he understood. This was mental-style physical hypnosis. Despite the sudden assault, he remained composed. A faint smile curved at the corner of his lips as he calmly parried the consecutive attacks. Teacher Yadai quickly noticed Chen unusual calmness. He showed no panic, not even the slightest frown. She realized that his mental power was far more resilient than she had initially estimated. The heavy pressure she exerted seemed no more burdensome to him than eating or drinking. As the flute continued to play, she quietly decided to increase the intensity of the mental pressure to test his true limits. Across the room, the situation was completely different for the others. Knees began to weaken. Some students could no longer stand upright. A few cried out in exhaustion, while others clutched desks for support to avoid collapsing. Several openly admitted they could not endure it any longer. To Teacher Yadai, this was not surprising. She had expected that most of them would not last under such strain. When she turned her focus back to Chen Du, she saw that although his body trembled slightly, he remained standing. He did not give in. Her curiosity deepened. Murmurs spread among the students. How could Chen Du still stand under this level of mental assault? She knew that Chen Du's family was not wealthy, making it almost impossible for him to rely on mental enhancement items. That led her to consider whether he possessed an innate talent for mental cultivation. Martial arts and mental power followed entirely different paths, and it was rare for someone to excel in both. In all her experience, she had never encountered a student quite like this. Meanwhile, Fang Hu could no longer withstand the pressure. Breathing heavily, he dropped to his knees and grabbed a desk to keep from collapsing. Even in his exhaustion, a faint smile appeared on his face. To him, Chen Du's endurance proved that his earlier defeat had not been due to weakness. His opponent had truly been strong. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the classroom. Everyone turned to see that the class number 1, Morid, had fallen to the floor. In that moment of defeat, he realized that Chen Du's dominance was not limited to physical strength. His mental power was equally extraordinary. If only his background had been different, he might have had the ability to enter one of the top 3 universities. Teacher Ya Dai could not conceal her shock. The top student had collapsed at level 6, yet Chen Du had endured into level 7. Determined to witness his ultimate limit, she raised the mental intensity by another level. Standing with his eyes closed, Chen Du's breathing grew heavy. In his mind, the towering image of a muscular man appeared, preparing for a final assault. A moment later, it charged forward. The force of the punch drove him back. When an even stronger strike landed, it felt as though he had been thrown from his position. He abruptly opened his eyes. Sweat soaked his forehead, and his breathing was uneven. He bent slightly, feeling a weight that pressed not only on his mind but on his physical body as well. He now fully understood that a mental battle could produce real effects on flesh and bone. Teacher Ya Dai fell into silent contemplation. Mental power exceeding one's life intensity was rare. Combined with Chen Du's high martial arts talent, it formed a nearly unseen pairing. In her view, he might walk the path of mental immunity, using his own strength to shatter opponents. A perfect warrior against the Big Eye civilization. After class, in the principal's office, the principal's voice rang out in disbelief upon hearing of Chen Du's dual talent. Teacher Ya Dai confirmed that she had personally witnessed everything. Teacher Ling added that he had spoken with Chen Du and believed the young man had the potential to reach level 20 and become a soaring martial artist. Teacher Ya Dai questioned whether such a level truly still existed and whether soaring martial artists could literally fly. The principal nearly held his head in excitement as he explained that a soaring martial artist was 1 in 10,000 favored by fate. It was a realm suited for geniuses like Chen Du. It would be a waste if he stopped at the top 8 famous schools. He should aim for one of the 3 top-tier martial arts universities that did not recruit through the regular entrance examination. He mentioned that after the 100-city hegemony tournament, Black Dragon Martial Arts University would hold a freshman selection in Cyber City. He instructed Teacher Ling to encourage Chen Du to participate, and Teacher Ling readily agreed. Later, in the faculty office, Chen Du politely asked if he had been summoned. Teacher Ling asked whether he was familiar with Black Dragon Martial Arts University. Chen Du replied that he knew it was among the top 3 institutions but lacked detailed knowledge. The teacher explained that it did not accept students through the regular entrance exam and only selected outstanding geniuses. To become a soaring martial artist, one needed a life intensity of 9.9 and Tier 1 mid-stage strength. Yet even among high school martial artists, only about half reached the mid-stage. Although qi and blood medicine could raise life intensity, not everyone could afford it. Many could not even purchase basic qi and blood milk, and by the time they earned enough money, their bodies might already have passed the optimal period for such cultivation. When asked whether he wished to try, Chen Du took a deep breath and answered seriously that he would attempt the selection. Internally, he understood the weight of possibly leaving his family behind, but he also knew he had to face this opportunity. Teacher Ling placed a hand on his shoulder and told him to give it everything he had. He could treat the top 8 famous schools as a safety net through early special admission while striving for a higher goal. With only 1 month remaining before the 100-city hegemony tournament, Chen Du decided to focus entirely on that objective. The next morning at home, his mother called him for breakfast. His sister noticed that something about him had changed in recent days. His posture was straighter, and his expression was harder to read. At the table, he informed them that he would temporarily leave at school to concentrate on training for the upcoming tournament. His mother reminded him not to neglect rest. His sister wondered why he had not moved earlier. He explained that every Hongzi class student had a personal martial arts room with resting facilities, and he now had sufficient resources. His father encouraged him to train diligently. After finishing his meal, Chen Du said goodbye and stepped out of the house. As he walked away, his family watched with hope and trust in their eyes, reminding him to take care of himself and give everything he had to reach first place. As soon as Chen Du stepped onto the campus, he did not slow down. His pace was steady and purposeful, and in his mind he repeatedly went over the resources allocated to him: 90 bags of Qi blood milk, 30 Qi blood pills, and 4 packs of perfect Qi blood powder. All of them were stored in the martial arts room, available for him to use at any time. By his estimation, their total value would not be less than 50,000. It made him realize even more clearly that the path of martial arts was not measured by diligence and talent alone. It required substantial financial support as well. When he reached his room, he first organized his belongings neatly before deciding to devote more time to training. Simply attending classes would not be enough. If he wanted to secure his position, he had to invest more effort into actual practice. After putting everything in order, he headed straight to the training area. Standing in the center, he instructed the robot to increase the gravity to 5 times the normal level. The robot responded immediately and activated the mode. In an instant, the entire space grew heavy. The air itself seemed denser. A thin layer of blue energy wrapped around Chen Du's body as he adjusted his grip on his sword. The pressure felt as though an enormous force was pressing down on him. Under such conditions, every movement had to be precise and controlled. The robot announced that the 4th round had begun. Chen Du raised his sword and faced the first wave of attacks. He knew that under extreme gravity, directly clashing with brute force was dangerous. A single miscalculation could injure his muscles or even fracture a bone. Instead of confronting the robot's strength head-on, he redirected the punches and used careful movements to conserve energy. A heavy punch shot toward him, but he narrowly avoided it. The robot provided an analysis. His evasion success rate was high, but energy consumption remained significant. Before he could fully reset his stance, the robot attacked again, striking high with a punch while delivering a low kick at the same time, effectively sealing off the usual escape paths. Chen Du did not panic. Instead, he incorporated the gravity into his strategy. Just as the kick was about to land, he leapt upward, dodging the punch, and with the added weight pulling him down, he precisely landed on the robot's shoulder. From that position, he launched a swift counterattack. His sword connected, forcing the robot to stagger back slightly as a faint trail of smoke rose from its side. The robot's movements changed. Its eyes glowed red as it announced a shift to its final protocol. Suddenly, it accelerated and charged again. Under 5 times gravity, Chen Du struggled to keep up with the increased speed. He was gradually cornered by the relentless assault and eventually slammed to the ground. Recognizing the outcome, he called out to the robot, "Little bear," to deactivate the gravity mode. Moments later, the pressure in the room returned to normal. He sat down and began cultivating. He could feel that his physical endurance had reached its limit for the day. To avoid wasting time, he activated the Void Immortal Visualization method to strengthen his mental power while his body rested. In his mind, glowing eyes slowly emerged from the darkness, followed by the vague outline of a massive being watching him in silence. He did not retreat. Instead, he intensified the blue energy and confronted the image directly. After some time, he opened his eyes and noticed that his mental power had increased by 0.3. Even so, his body was exhausted and trembling slightly. He drank Qi blood milk to replenish his energy, but the effect was not enough to fully restore him. He decided to sleep. Before drifting off, he resolved to continue training in the crystal space. In his dream, his consciousness appeared within the crystal space. He pulled the sword from the ground, and the surroundings shifted immediately. One after another, green firefly giants materialized around him. The first time he had faced them, he had not understood their nature and had failed to defeat even one. Now, he was prepared to try again. Releasing the blue energy, he charged at one of the giants. He quickly observed that the green section on their bodies was not a mere marking but the source of their healing energy. Their defense was thick, and they possessed no other special abilities. Destroying that green core was clearly the key to bringing them down. As he leapt from one giant's head to another, he noticed that his movements felt lighter and more controlled than before. The gravity training had significantly improved his balance and timing. Because of this, he decided to continue using that method to strengthen himself. With another precise strike, one of the giants finally collapsed. As the battle continued, he understood that this kind of preparation would greatly increase his chances of entering the top 3 in the 100 Cities Hegemony tournament. Several days later, his team arrived in High City for the tournament itself. When they stepped into the hotel,
Chen noticed the luxury of the surroundings. The lobby was elegant and meticulously maintained, far beyond anything he had experienced before. Instructor Ling excused himself to handle the arrival arrangements, leaving the students waiting. While they stood there, a loud voice suddenly echoed across the lobby. Chen turned and saw a student with his hair tied back arguing angrily with the receptionist. It was Wu Sang from the Lu City participating team. He insisted that he had arrived on time and violated no rules, so he could not accept being treated as if he were at fault. He demanded a clear explanation, but the receptionist, visibly nervous, struggled to respond. Wu Sang took a deep breath and slowly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. From his posture and the tension in his shoulders, it was obvious that if the matter could not be resolved with words, he was prepared to settle it by force.
The chapter ends here. Watch out for our upcoming uploads. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you'll always be updated on our future videos.